On Life and Meaning is brought to you by Blumenthal Performing Arts, celebrating its 25th year presenting the best in the performing arts, sharing and employing the arts as a major catalyst to strengthen education, building community cohesiveness, and advancing economic growth. Further support is provided by Charlotte Mecklenburg Library, one of America's leading urban public libraries, delivering exceptional services and programs with a mission to improve lives and build a stronger community. And by the Arts and Science Council, Charlotte Mecklenburg's resource hub and lead advocate for the regional cultural community, providing culture for all.
The best part for me, and I think the moments that I enjoy the most, are standing in the lobby and being a bit of a fly on the wall and just seeing people come in and observing their expression and the conversation, realizing that we've created this moment that for some kid in that room, it'll be like it was for me going to hear the U.S. Marine Corps Band. It'll be that transformational moment. For other people, it'll be that time that brings that family together and perhaps heals some wounds. It perhaps is the place where people are having a first date. But to realize that all these people are there because I invited them, because I envisioned having this event, kind of setting the table of inviting the artist, inviting the audience, and then creating this moment for people to have together.
Tom Gabbard is president and CEO of Blumenthal Performing Arts in Charlotte, North Carolina. The Blumenthal manages 6 performance stages and hosts over 1,000 events annually. Tom is a member of the Board of Governors of the Broadway League and is a Tony Award voter. He is a recipient of the Samuel J. Homadou Award for Outstanding Achievement in Presenter Management. Tom serves as president of the Independent Presenters Network, a consortium of 40 leading touring Broadway presenters in North America, Asia, and the United Kingdom. He was the founding managing director of Pepperdine University Center for the Arts and the executive director of the Arvada Center for the Arts and Humanities in Colorado and the Weidner Center for the Performing Arts in Wisconsin. In this episode, we explore presenting shows that transform people and place. I'm Mark Paris, and this is On Life and Meaning. Tom, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. How do you think of the Blumenthal Performing Arts Center? What comes to mind when you think of this organization that you lead?
Boy, that has so many different facets to it, and people know us for so many different things, which I'm thankful for. I mean, first of all, I think it's an institution that has changed as Charlotte has changed, and in our 25th anniversary year, we've focused our thoughts on that a great deal. This place was created as a part of the transformation of Charlotte and to transform uptown life, and it's accomplished a lot of that and continues to be a part of that transformation. But I think increasingly now we are much more focused on the transformation of people, and it goes beyond the physical transformation of uptown to how we have an impact on individual lives. But to me, it's a fascinating metamorphosis that we've gone from being focused on uptown life and vitality of uptown to how we become a positive part of cultural life, educational life here in Charlotte. A lot of people know us best for the big Broadway shows, and that's great, and it's been wonderful that we've been able to serve a pretty incredible appetite for theatrical shows that Charlotte has. I think what's less known are the ways that we're very involved with niche things on stages, but particularly niche things educationally, where we're involved with especially young people, our Junior Ambassador program, which is a leadership development program for juniors and seniors in high school. Those are, I think, particularly as Charlotte's grappling with some of the social mobility issues, I'm really proud of the fact that we're actively doing some things that are making a difference.
Let's take a step back, Tom. How do you describe the scope and work of the Blumenthal?
First of all, one of the things that is absolutely unique about Blumenthal is it does dominate this marketplace in a way that's quite unusual. And having done this work all across the country and knowing my peers across the country, Blumenthal really does have a far greater impact in this community than a similar place does in other communities, where there are more players, where there are more venues. We manage most of the large major venues here in town, and so that aggregation of venues and control of spaces is pretty unusual. And the fact that we not only manage those facilities, but we're active as a programmer and producer to bring shows here, that's unusual. So we do have, I think, a far greater impact in this community than our peers do in their respective communities.
To put some numbers on that, how many stages are you managing and programming?
So currently it's 6 that we actively manage, and then in addition to that, Ovens Auditorium, we are typically their largest renter out there. We don't manage Ovens, but we do quite a bit of activity out at Ovens, so that would be a 7th stage. And then, beyond those stages, increasingly we've pushed activity outside, and so we're doing things out on the street, and we're doing things at the Wells Fargo Plaza in non-traditional spaces that go beyond those stages.
And over the course of a year on all of those stages, how many events or shows are you producing?
The overall activity, including renters, is in excess of 1,000 performances. There are thousands of other activities, meetings and classes and things, but when it comes to public performances, it's over 1,000 every year. Typically about 50 to 60% are Blumenthal generated. And again, that's quite unusual. Most of my colleagues, they are facility managers, and then they rely on renters to occupy their stages. In our case, we're pleased to have lots of great renters here. But we work hard to generate activity ourselves that keep the stages busy.
What is the mission of the Blumenthal?
We focus on 3 things. First and foremost is to bring the best of the performing arts to Charlotte. Number 2 is to create economic vitality. And number 3 is education that enriches the community. And so, if you look at what goes on here, I think it's strongly focused in all 3.
The Blumenthal is celebrating its 25th year. What is this year about strategically?
I think it's a couple of things. One is to celebrate the achievement of what they created. This city is so full of newcomers, we don't realize how difficult it was to do what they did. They actually worked for 12 years to make the Performing Arts Center happen.
And they being whom, Tom?
The organizing committee, led particularly by Deborah Harris, but Hugh McCall was an exceptional leader in that. But many of the consultants told them that raising the money to create this place was an impossible dream. Creating something of this scale was an impossible thing. There was not one nice restaurant open after 5:30 p.m. when they opened the Performing Arts Center. It was a very different place. So 12 years of hard work, they realized that dream. And so reminding ourselves that big ideas sometimes take a while. We're in the midst of now in Charlotte looking at new initiatives and big ideas that seem daunting. And I think it's important for us to remind ourselves that a generation or 2 back, we had people that dreamed big dreams and stayed at it to make it happen. I think it's also a year in which then we reflect on the future and how we define a meaningful place for Blumenthal for this next generation. And as I said, I think the first generation, a lot of it was about the transformation of uptown Charlotte and creating a really vibrant city center. But in this next generation, I think it's increasingly about how we use these events to actually create fundamental change in people, and how we help these events to improve civic discourse, intellectual life, creative life, and social life.
How is your time divided as a CEO?
My time, by necessity, is really focused more externally. I'm fortunate to have a really great operating team here that run the facilities wonderfully, and I inherited that. My predecessor put together a really good team, and so I had the good fortune to come in and be able to focus externally, which is where I need to focus. I am the public face for Blumenthal, not just here locally, but certainly outside of Charlotte. And so my time is best spent being that public face, particularly in New York. This is very much a people-to-people business in the entertainment world. And so my profile in New York, working with producers and other creative people, is an important part of making sure that we succeed in the future. I'd say I'm also really focused, and perhaps some of this is just my own kind of personal style, that I'm really focused on new initiatives. When something is working well, it doesn't need my time and attention. And so I gravitate to the new initiatives, which again is as I think it should be. People need to always see fresh new things coming from us. So if I focus on those new initiatives, those new ideas, then institutionally I'm doing the smart thing.
You mentioned that you interact with producers in New York, but you are also a producer yourself. What does it mean to produce a show? What does a producer actually do?
A producer does, I would say, three things. First of all, comes up with money. Like any theater is a business. As I introduced a Woody Allen saying to one of my past board chairs, Rick Puckett, who loves to restate to everybody that if it weren't a business, they'd call it show. So this is a business, and so coming up with the money is the first thing that a producer does. Secondly, a producer, particularly a managing producer, assembles the creative team. And the creative team really ultimately comes up with the creative product, but assembling that team, deciding who to give that responsibility to, is the producer's call. And then thirdly, the producer makes the strategic decisions about what to do with that show, how to approach its development, how to approach its marketing, how to approach its if it's a Broadway show, how to approach its afterlife. So those strategic decisions are with the producer. You know, I think people somehow have this fictional idea that a producer sits in a rehearsal hall and is involved barking out orders to the creative people about this or that, and it doesn't work that way. Certainly in this day and age, that the producer entrusts many of the artistic choices to a creative team that they have selected. So they ultimately do have control by selecting them. But ostensibly, the producer is the CEO and provides that guidance.
What shows have you produced?
I've been the day-to-day producer of Traces, which was an off-Broadway show that we toured across the United States that landed in this world that was a little bit of Stomp, a little bit of Cirque du Soleil. I was the day-to-day producer for the national tour of 9 to 5. And then beyond that, I've been a co-producer, which means that I am a part of the board of directors for the show, but not the day-to-day producer for literally about 60 or 70 Broadway shows, like Spamalot, The Color Purple, Thoroughly Modern Millie, Legally Blonde, quite a few shows. Now, it typically is anywhere from about 4 to 6 shows a year. So put together a significant investment in the show, usually about 10% of its capitalization, Blumenthal participates with a portion of it, but then I go to my colleagues across the country and raise most of the money and pool that. And by virtue of that, then I'm a member of what would be the board of directors for the show to make the strategic decisions. And that's what's really important from our vantage is to have some strategic voice in how that show comes together and particularly what its plans are to go out on tour.
You mentioned having the Blumenthal participate in the financing of shows, which raised a question in my mind. When you produce a show, are you producing as CEO of the Blumenthal or individually as Tom Gabbard?
Almost, with very few exceptions, it's been as CEO of the Blumenthal because, this is all about our helping to create shows and acquiring the rights to present them in Charlotte. So it really is with a long-term vision of making sure that we have a healthy pipeline of shows coming here to Charlotte. And so it's very much a part of our strategy here in Charlotte to have this vibrant theatrical market, to actually invest in shows and then be able to be a part of its decision-making.
Part of the budget of the Blumenthal on an annual basis is to invest in shows.
Yes, it is. Some of those shows will ultimately make us money, but many of them don't. And that's it. With new shows, you don't know whether or not it's going to work until it happens. and you can have, great hopes for a show, but ultimately, until it actually gets in front of an audience, you don't know if it's going to happen. But particularly with the number of stages we have, it's really important that we help fund the creation of new work. It's interesting in New York, the financing of these shows has migrated from an old world culture in which a small group of moneyed people that live in New York or live in the tri-state area there finance these shows really as a hobby. It's migrated now much more towards people like Blumenthal and others who work in the industry who are reliant on these shows to actually put forward some of the investment capital because it's very high risk, and so the traditional individual will be smart enough to say, no, I'm not going to put my money there. But for us, where we need to see these new shows happen, it's important that we put money forward to make sure that the show is created.
Would this be equivalent to AMC or Regal Theater investing in the producing of movies?
Maybe. I think in some respects it's more like high tech, that there's R&D money that goes into creating new gadgets. And a few years ago when there actually was kind of a crisis in financing these shows, my colleague in Cleveland at Playhouse Square, where they have the second largest aggregation of theaters outside of Lincoln Center, he said, it's like I've built all of these new showrooms to sell automobiles, and then Detroit stops making cars. And so we did have a crisis a few years ago where that was the case, and people like Blumenthal needed to step forward to help create investment capital so that these shows did form.
Are there any conflicts in having the distributor fund the production of the show?
Yeah, I don't think it's a conflict, and in fact, I'd say it's a real strength. Number one, we have purposefully sought out opportunities to do culturally diverse work that might not have happened. And so, for instance, The Color Purple, we were among the first investors in the musical The Color Purple because I firmly believe that if we want African American audiences here, part of how we do that is to have shows that are relevant to African Americans. So some of these shows, particularly that are diverse or artistically a little more interesting, from a mission standpoint, if we want to see those happen, then we have to actually be involved financially, or they won't happen.
But you will choose shows that you have a financial interest in over those that you do not.
Maybe, yeah. They are favored children, In our case, where we do bring just about everything from recent Broadway seasons that's being done at a high quality level. We won't bring very often any non-union shows, but if a first class tour goes out, we'll bring everything. And so we're not playing favorites there. What we bring includes some of our children. And it also is a part of developing an audience for these things too, because with some of these new shows, by virtue of being an investor, we talk about it, in our marketing, and for several years we will talk about a show before it comes to Charlotte. Well, that helps to develop awareness and an appetite for that show so that when it ultimately comes here, it's more successful because our audience has been prepared for it.
Is the decision as to which show to invest in using Blumenthal monies solely your decision, or is that a conversation that happens at the board level as well?
Under a certain financial threshold, that's a decision that is totally mine. I'm president of a group called the Independent Presenters Network, which aggregates 40 of the leading Broadway presenters across mainly North America, but it also includes the UK, Japan, and China. And so a lot of the activity we do is under the umbrella of the Independent Presenters Network. So the decision to get behind a show is really part of a bigger decision by the Independent Presenters Network to get behind a show and help it happen. I'm frequently, on behalf of IPN, in the room when a show is given its first reading. So we're looking at these new projects and deciding not just for Blumenthal, but for the major Broadway presenters across the country, what shows to support and what shows not to.
What informs the planning and scheduling of a season?
Our planning is for anybody that was a Star Trek fan. Remember that multi-layer kind of chess game that they played? Our schedule is kind of like that, in that there are some things we put on our calendar that are 4 and 5 years out. There are other things that are much, much shorter. We extended the cutoff a little bit a few years ago, but now we'll book things as late as 8 weeks out. Used to be 6 weeks. So yeah, we're adding things on our calendar that are as soon as 6 weeks away, and some that are 4 and 5 years away. We do try to cover niches that nobody else covers. I honestly am not interested in doing things that compete with what other people are doing or duplicate with what other people are doing. We used to do a lot of children's theater, and then when they built Imaginon and Children's Theater of Charlotte really ramped up its game, I just said, you know what? We're going to stop doing a lot of these things because Children's Theater has that covered. They do a really good job. So unless they can't get the rights for a certain show, then, or they're choosing not to do a certain show, we're just going to stay away from that niche. And so we do try to focus on things that nobody else is doing. We don't do symphony orchestra tours because other people, we've got a great symphony, and we have Charlotte concerts that bring in some groups. So yeah, focusing on those things that if we don't do, they're not going to happen. That is a very high priority.
How much do your personal preferences and personal taste drive the curation of what Blumenthal offers?
Hopefully very little. And that again, I think is something that people probably have a misperception about. I mean, in the old world setting, some of my colleagues, would absolutely make their tastes. If it didn't please them, then it didn't get time. In my philosophy of programming, that's a real dangerous thing. I program with the public in mind, and so it's more a question of, do I think there's an audience for that? My tastes do come into play in assessing the quality, and so I will make some qualitative judgments about is the professional quality, is the artistic quality reasonable? Because We do say no to some things that we just think are too amateurish for particularly our Broadway series. So my taste does come into play there in assessing the technical and creative elements. But if I think there's an audience for something, I will absolutely not have a hesitation to book something that I personally wouldn't buy a ticket for, because I acknowledge that there's an audience out there who is interested in that and who deserves to be served.
Do leaders of artistic organizations have a responsibility to respond to the times in which we live?
Oh, we have an absolute responsibility to respond to the times. And certainly here, I think we try to do that. And to figure out a way to do it in a responsible and constructive way. I mean, I do think there are times when somebody suggests doing a show that will really stir things up that I just think would be destructive. I want to be a constructive part of the conversation. I loved that a few years back when the City Council was grappling about changes in our regulation and the bathroom law and all of that craziness, that we had 2 runs of Kinky Boots here, which I think in a very uplifting way dealt with this issue of respect for other people and being true to who you were, but ultimately respecting others and respecting our differences. I love that we had that show playing here at 2 different times that I think in its own little way constructively added to the discussion.
Was that a happy accident in terms of the timing, or was that an intentional programming to ignite debate or to stir the conscience of patrons?
It was a healthy accident, and so that was one of those serendipitous things. But I do think, that there are times, particularly some of the initiatives we've had of late, like Breaking Convention, which is this hip-hop festival. We saw in that an opportunity to bring a multiracial, multi-generational group together in a very uplifting way, and that Charlotte desperately needed that. As we created the Charlotte Jazz Festival a few years ago, we created a huge free component and picnic tables and places for people to hang out and be together because Charlotte needed that. So sometimes it's not even addressing a political issue as it is realizing that we can play a constructive role in community life to help a community at a time that it needs that help.
Tom, last summer, the New York Public Theater showed a modern version of Caesar in Shakespeare in the Park, in which Caesar was a Trump-like character. Is that a show that the Blumenthal would offer?
Since I didn't see it, I know it's not like I'm hedging, but since I didn't see it, I can't say for sure. We probably wouldn't. Number one, we don't do that much Shakespeare here at all. I do think we try to be really savvy about when to be provocative. We want to be provocative in ways that are constructive and not provocative just to be in your face. And so there are certain things that I've shied away from that I know would stir the pot and get people riled up, that I've just said no to. I prefer to be provocative in a constructive way that's uplifting. And I think there are plenty of opportunities to do that, where you really can address an important issue. I say Kinky Boots, where a show about drag queens, I think is kind of the epitome of a very upbeat, uplifting show that actually takes on an important current issue.
Is there a show that you've said no to because you found it inappropriately provocative?
I wouldn't say so much that as one show that some audience will recognize that won the Pulitzer Prize that we said no to was August Osage County, because I just thought everybody in this show is despicable. There is no redemption for anybody in this. There is no uplift. These are all just despicable people. And so I said no to that show, and a number of my colleagues also said no to it for the same reason. But, I think of shows like Spring Awakening, or now it almost seems passé, but Rent, stirred up a lot of dust. There have been none of those that we've stayed away from. I do make it a point to really be clear in our communications and to warn people and allow them to make a choice. And I've done that for many, many years, even before I got to Charlotte, where the message has basically been, we are really thrilled to have this Tony Award-winning, Pulitzer, whatever it is, to have this show coming to Charlotte, but it has language or content issues that for some people may be a problem. We encourage you to do some homework and make a decision for yourself. And if it's a problem for you, we'll provide you a path to switch your tickets for something else that you're comfortable with.
Why wouldn't you have done that for August Osage County?
I think just this, again, it had nothing to do with content so much as I think in terms of satisfying audiences, that a story that that has no even moment of redemption or insight. This was actually a theory that Josh Logan, who is a legendary Broadway director, he was really the guy who had the idea to do the musical South Pacific. Josh had this theory that for audiences to be satisfied, that there either has to be some redemption or a lead character has to at least have some glimpse as to where they went wrong. That if it just ends just totally negatively, that audiences are going to leave dissatisfied. So it really wasn't so much about content as do I think audiences will ultimately leave feeling like it was worth their time.
I went to a showing of The Red Shoes. It was stunning in beauty and execution. It was a play and performance without dialogue. And several people walked out confused and disappointed. What do you make of that?
Oh, number one, I'm not surprised, and in our case, again, we try to be clear with people about how to become informed about a show and make a decision as to whether it's for them. In this case, a show without any dialogue is a challenge for folks, and especially if people are coming to have a traditional musical theater experience. So yeah, would I love for everybody to like every show? Absolutely. But I guarantee you, every single show we do here, we know from our audience surveys, has its lovers and haters. But we do pride ourselves in making sure that we provide some things that really are enriching and that are a stretch. And something like Matthew Bourne is a stretch. But I do that without any guilt, because with our subscribers, we allow them to actually swap out of up to 4 shows. So if somebody took the time to do their homework and saw that and said, it's not my cup of tea, they had a way out. There are some people, I think, that are frustrated because they don't want to think about that. They want to just feel like, okay, if Blumenthal is selected to these shows, it's a guarantee I'm going to have a great time. And if we did it that way, we artistically, I think, would be a lot less interesting, and we choose to aim a little bit higher in the breadth of things that we do.
There's a general consensus in the critical press that we're in a golden age of theater. Are we?
We're certainly in a golden age of Broadway. And I'm on the executive committee for the Broadway League and the finance committee. So I see these numbers every week, and we are historic highs in terms of sales. And I think artistically, we're really at a height. Hamilton represents one of the all-time great Broadway shows. But wonderfully, it's not a fluke. We've had some other great shows artistically. The next year, the Tony Award winner for Best Musical was Dear Evan Hansen, which I'm pleased to say we're co-producers of. This is a serious musical. It's about social media, teen suicide. It's a serious musical, and it's doing, as Variety would say, boffo business. Another show that we're co-producers of that just opened a few months ago is The Band's Visit. another serious musical. Both Evan Hansen and Band's Visit are small musicals. There are no giant casts. There are no chandeliers that crash or helicopters in them. They're both small musicals, and they're selling tickets like crazy. So yeah, we are in this golden age, and these things don't last forever, but looking at what's in the pipeline, again, I go to the first readings of many shows. I think the pipeline is strong with things that are artistically strong.
You made a distinction between Broadway and theater generally. Is theater outside of Broadway troubled?
Yeah, I do think we see a lot of warning signs in the fine arts world. There are very few American symphony orchestras that are strong. The only ones really that are strong are places like the Los Angeles Philharmonic that are strong in part because they have the Hollywood Bowl to pay the bills for the rest of the year. So yeah, when you look at the attendance levels for the more traditional arts, you'll see those attendance levels slipping. What is happening is I think ultimately people are as engaged, if not more engaged creatively than they've ever been, but they're shifting their interests to non-traditional things. They're engaged creatively online. There are people that think that their YouTube habits are their creative outlet, and I could question that, but they view that as a creative outlet. So I think people are creatively involved, perhaps more than ever, but in non-traditional things that are a bit under the radar.
In running the Blumenthal over the last 15 years, is there a decision you've made that in retrospect you would have made differently?
I'm sure there is, but nothing that comes to mind. I mean, I think here beyond Charlotte, I guess I'm at a point in my career, late in my career, that I look back and I wish I'd been bolder more often, that I wish I had had more courage to do things that may not have been that I didn't do, but maybe I waited too long to do them. You know, it's, especially for those of us that have any perfectionist tendencies, sometimes we can overthink these things. And as I've gotten later in my career, I've realized that taking too long to try something can be the chief mistake. You know, you have to manage the risk, but it's actually better to act faster and to try things. And I can look back to say, you know, I waited too long to have to muster the courage to try this or that.
What was the missed opportunity?
Well, for instance, we just in the Booth Playhouse, we've taken out many of our seats at the lower level and gone to flexible seating so that we can begin operating the space in a much more flexible way and change the configuration and do things in the round and immersively. That's been something I've wanted to do for a lot of years, but taking out the seats and throwing them away, actually getting rid of a lot of the traditional theater seats and going to flexible seating and changing it up. Now that we've done it, it's like the coolest thing. Everybody loves the first few things that we've done there, and I look back and I think, well, why didn't we do this a few years ago?
Tom, let's talk about you. You were a child in San Jose?
I grew up in San Jose, right.
What was that time like for you?
You know, it was a great community to grow up in, and certainly the early days of Silicon Valley. And you know, my dad worked for NASA, and I had two uncles that worked for NASA, and very involved with the space program. So I do think I was blessed to grow up in a technology encouraged environment. But yeah, I think that and a child of the 60s. You know, my dad was involved with a number of anti-war things and Peace Corps related things. We did a lot of work in Mexico where he took high school and college students to Mexico and built houses. So yeah, I was very much kind of a child of the 60s in that Bay Area culture.
How do you think that's influenced you today?
I think I've got a strong social concern. Some people that know me as a business person might be surprised to that, but I think that interest in social justice and change, I think, is absolutely there. And hopefully, if people study, we'll see it manifest in what I do artistically. But I think that was absolutely nurtured of being that child of the 60s in the San Francisco Bay Area.
You were introduced to the arts at a young age.
Yeah, I was fortunate, that my parents encouraged that. I mean, I got the message loudly and clearly when my dad would not make time to show up at my Little League games, but he would never miss a band or choir concert of where my priorities should be. But the pivotal moment for me was fourth grade, going on a school field trip to hear the U.S. Marine Corps band, which is this legendary band from Washington, D.C., and hearing them play Sousa marches and deciding that's what I'm going to do. And so I started studying the French horn in fourth grade, which to me, it was just great evidence of the importance of school field trips, how a singular moment like that can be transformative. So not only did I decide at fourth grade that I wanted to play the French horn, but I decided I wanted to be a high school band director.
A Sousa march set you on your path in life.
It did. Thank you, John Philip Sousa.
So you began to play music. Do you still play?
I don't. When I graduated from college, I gave up the French horn, and actually I had two horns, and I gave them away because I knew I was the sort, that if I couldn't really do it well, I would be really frustrated by it. I used to play guitar. I used to teach guitar, but I gave all these things away. In my case, I have enough creative outlets because my work is so creative that I'm not frustrated by it. I can imagine other people, if they pursued other professions, they didn't have a creative outlet, that they would need to continue with that. For me, I have so many other creative outlets, it's not a problem.
You went to college in Malibu at Pepperdine, and you did study music. What were your ambitions then?
I was a performance major and actually had a full tuition scholarship. So I had to perform, both play my French horn and sing, and I did a lot of technical theater, and I had to as a condition of my scholarship. But I figured out probably halfway through my sophomore year that I was really more adept at the management side. And so even though I continued to perform as a condition of my scholarship all through college, I began taking business courses and preparing to go into a M.B.A. program right after undergrad. But I always tell students that performance experience is really essential. I think it was really important for me to create my own aesthetic sensibilities. I mean, I performed a lot. And so I feel like I understand performers a lot better. I think my artistic sense is a lot stronger because I spent so much time all the way through college doing lots and lots of different performance.
Tom, you earned an M.B.A. in Arts Administration at Golden Gate University, but you also took a year of law school. You were thinking about the law, weren't you?
Yeah, I was interested in perhaps getting into entertainment law. And because I was on staff at Pepperdine University and the law school was just right up the street, the school was very good to allowed me to go to law school. And so I did the first year program and ultimately realized, that it really wasn't my life's path. I'm really glad I had that first year because I got contracts and my writing improved incredibly. I will always be thankful for law school for improving my writing. So I got, from a business perspective, I think, some of the most important classes, but I also had that self-awareness that actually pursuing the law alternatively was not the right choice for me. But I also realized ultimately I was probably not going to become the attorney that I would want to hire. I'm too eager to try to get to yes and to figure out creative ways to get to yes, that fighting over minutia was not my forte.
You could be a very different person today wearing pinstripes in an office in Los Angeles.
Very different. Thankfully not.
Yeah. How did you find your way to the Blumenthal?
I found my way through my predecessor, Judith Allen. Judith and I we're good friends through the Broadway League, the Independent Presenters Network that I discussed earlier. Judith was a member, and when it came to these investment activities and putting together investments and shows, Judith and I were compadres in that whole thing. So when she reached a point of retirement, of having decided she wanted to retire, we were both at a meeting in Boston together, and we were at a concert one night, and she said, "Look, I'm going to retire, and I want you to take my job," which is really a pretty unusual circumstance. But as she, I think, wisely advised the board that, unless they were interested in finding somebody from outside the field, there were just a very small group of people who worked at this level. The Broadway program I had in Wisconsin was actually bigger than we had it in Charlotte at that time. So, by hiring me, they were hiring somebody that absolutely knew the field and was known in the field. So her retirement and my appointment were announced in the same press release, a very unusual circumstance that I'm thankful for, and I'll always be grateful for the opportunity.
Tom, you have been here 15 years. If a performing arts center in New York or London called, would you go?
Honestly, I do get that call regularly, but I think I'm in an ideal place. I really do. I'm not saying that just to sound nice. I'm thankful to be in this community. It's a dynamic community, and that was one of the things that we saw in choosing to come here, that this was a community that had a healthy sense of ambition, that has a dynamism in it. It's welcoming to newcomers. It has all the right ingredients for me to succeed in my business. It's reasonably close to New York, that now that I'm so firmly ingrained in the New York theater business, I'm in New York over the course of the year, probably a total of about 2 to 3 months most years. And so it's close enough to New York, I can make it even a day trip. So yeah, this is the ideal place to do what I do.
Is there a third act for you now, Tom, after Blumenthal?
Number one, Blumenthal's given me an opportunity to take on new things. And as my wife has always told trustees, who worry about me leaving, to say, look, as long as Tom continues to have new things to take on, he's happy. He gets bored and starts looking around if there are not new things to take on. And again, that's one of the things I value about this community is it is dynamic. It has seen the arts as an important part of creating a healthy community. Whether or not it's taking on more new initiatives like the Charlotte Jazz Festival or what we do with Breaking Convention or pushing the inside out, my board, I'm just so grateful, has always been game to look at what the next new thing should be.
Tom, what's the best part of what you do?
The best part for me, and I think the moments that I enjoy the most, are standing in the lobby and being a bit of a fly on the wall and just seeing people come in and observing their expression and the conversation, realizing that we've created this moment that for some kid in that room, it'll be like it was for me going to hear the U.S. Marine Corps Band. It'll be that transformational moment. For other people, it'll be that time that brings that family together and perhaps heals some wounds. It perhaps is the place where people are having a first date. But to realize that all these people are there because I invited them, because I envisioned having this event, kind of setting the table of inviting the artist, inviting the audience, and then creating this moment for people to have together.
Thank you for your time today, Tom.
Thank you.
Tom Gabbard is president and CEO of Blumenthal Performing Arts. Tom holds a B.A. in music performance from Pepperdine University and an M.B.A. in arts management from Golden Gate University. And now, a personal word. Beauty, war, religion, love, loss, life, death, redemption. The human condition, in all its wonder and depravity, is at the heart of the arts and humanities. It is also at the heart of what Tom Gabbard presents to the city of Charlotte every day and night. Blumenthal Performing Arts is where we confront who we are, where we gather to be amazed, where we are challenged, and where we are renewed by the light of the human spirit. The Blumenthal presents the best in the performing arts, so it claims, and it's hard to argue that it does not. Across its 6 stages, the Belk Theater, Booth Playhouse, and the Stage Door Theater at Blumenthal Performing Arts Center, McGlowan Theater and the Duke Energy Theater at Spirit Square, and Night Theater at the Levine Center for the Arts, the Blumenthal offers unmatched entertainment, from Broadway blockbusters to concerts, spoken word, dance, symphony, drama, and comedy. Tom is an impresario, financing, organizing, and delivering a dizzying array of shows. The meaning of the work goes beyond the satisfaction of audiences. The Blumenthal has transformed the physical street and is about the mission of changing lives. It is elevating citizenship and civic discourse and providing paths for social mobility. It is a driver of the regional economy as it builds social capital and community. Is there an unintended consequence to all this success? There may be. Tom mentioned that the Blumenthal's dominance of the art scene in Charlotte is far greater than in peer cities. Charlotte benefits from the hundreds of polished and uplifting productions on several stages, but these performances are all under the Blumenthal's banner. The Blumenthal determines what is on stage, when it is on stage, and what stage it is on. It essentially controls the calendar of the majority of the premium cultural offerings in the city. What is the effect of that dominance? One effect is that the taste and programming of the Blumenthal largely defines art performance in Charlotte. Another effect may be that the Blumenthal squeezes out a healthy ecosystem of competing homegrown offerings that are not on Blumenthal stages. This last point is arguable and controversial. This is what I do know. The Blumenthal enriches the lives of thousands of artists and hundreds of thousands of citizens with its exploration of the arts and what it means to be human. I also know that the Blumenthal has been incredibly generous, supporting the efforts of independent grassroots artists in the city, from open mic night to extending their stages to diverse resident companies, to writing checks sponsoring new ideas and artistic innovation. The Blumenthal sponsored Charlotte Viewpoint, the civic and cultural nonprofit magazine that I founded and edited for nearly 10 years, and is the lead sponsor of this podcast. 1 month into the production of On Life and Meaning, I asked Tom if he would support our efforts. Not only did he say yes, he offered an array of support beyond a check. He lent the credibility and brand of the Blumenthal to our effort, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. All of which suggests that the Blumenthal knows it is in its self-interest to support an ecosystem of artists and art consumers, whether those artists are on Blumenthal stages or not. A great city has many champions. Many go unsung. Tom Gabbard is a champion of the arts and humanities, producing and co-producing what is best in ourselves. This is Mark Paris, and you've been listening to On Life and Meaning. Thank you to my partners Andy Go, producer of the show, and to Chris Curriton, art and media director. This is how you can help. Please write a review on iTunes. It helps us grow our audience. Follow us on Facebook. We'd love to hear what you think about the show. And become a patron. We are on Patreon, a crowdsourcing platform that allows you to support what you value. Visit us also on our website, onlifeandmeaning.com. Thank you for listening.